Sounds like a plan. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I hope you are well. I am very excited to be a part of the Empowerment and Policy Conference 2022, where we're doing equitable sustainability, building Louisiana's infrastructure beyond roads and bridges. My name is Telley Madina. I'm the president of the Madina Group Consultant and moderator for the day. But most importantly, as a portion of my responsibilities, I am a board member of the Urban League of Louisiana. Happy to serve as your moderator today to talk about the discussion about broadband and digital equity. There's a huge gap between those with and without high-speed internet access, as well as those who have access but can't afford to connect. These gaps make the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act an opportunity for states like ours to build actionable plans that prioritize connectivity and affordable access in rural and urban areas. This panel will discuss what's possible, what's probable, and the actions that families can take to ensure connectivity. So let's meet our panelists. First, we will introduce Veneeth Iyengar, Louisiana State Executive Director for Broadband Development and Connectivity. So Veneeth, we're happy to have you. Secondly, we'll have one of my mentors and longtime friends, Ms. Kim LaGrue, who's the Chief Information Officer for the City of New Orleans. So Ms. Kim, we are happy to have you here. And we also have Ms. Tess, and I practiced her last name, I pray I don't get it wrong, Zaretsky. She's the manager with Strategic Partnerships and EducationSuperHighway. So we are happy to have all the panelists, and we're grateful to have you here for some of your time. So we're ready to get started with some of the questions. And we got all the screens up. Ms. Kim, can we see your beautiful face? We have everyone here. Tess, we can see you. Veneeth, you're not as beautiful as Ms. Kim, but we're happy to see your face as well. So we will go right into the questions. And this is for Veneeth. As Executive Director of the state's Office of Broadband Development and Connectivity, can you tell us what the state of broadband and connectivity is in Louisiana and how the Infrastructure Act can support Louisiana's residents to get connected to high-speed internet access?
Well, thanks and good afternoon for being on this panel. I really appreciate Judy and the relationship that we've had with the Urban League, not only at the state, but also nationally. In fact, we often cite the Latimer Plan, which is your digital equity plan, when we talk about both strategies and tactics that we have to address and create for those who are African-American. And so let me frame the challenge that we have in Louisiana in terms of the sizing of the problem, and then talk very specifically about tactics around access, affordability, and digital literacy, which is really the three big issues driving the digital divide. So in Louisiana, there are approximately 1.5 million people in the state, 47% of whom are African-American and Latinos, that lack internet because of one of really four reasons. A, they have lack of access. B, it's an affordability issue. C, it's a digital literacy issue. And then the fourth is a device issue. And so I think what we saw during the pandemic was that summarily, whether you lived in East Carroll Parish or Cameron Parish or East Baton Rouge Parish or Orleans Parish or Jefferson, wherever you lived, you were summarily impacted by the lack of internet due to one of those four reasons. So let's then start talking about tactics. It isn't just the infrastructure bill, and this is sometimes gets glossed over, right? The infrastructure bill got signed November 15th, and obviously the U.S. Department of Commerce and the National Telecommunications Information Administration will administer 75 to 80% of the money, broadband, $65 billion in broadband money. It's going to be disseminated in the form, it looks like community block grants, but it's going to be formulaic in terms of how it gets disseminated on a per state basis in terms of the final number that we receive. So while that's getting a lot of the attention, what we also have in Louisiana going forward in terms of infrastructure dollars to addressing access is the state of Louisiana, specifically our office, is administrating $177 million currently as part of the first state broadband grant program called Gumbo. And that money is coming from the America Rescue Plan. And the way that money behaves is that The first 90 million was authorized by the legislature last year, and we're currently evaluating round one applications for that program. We then go back to the legislature in the next couple of weeks and ask for the balance of the money, and then we do round two. So that's 177 million focused on access. And then the first program that was executed under the previous administration is a program called the Rural Digital Opportunities Fund. And so RDOF for short is a program in which the Federal Communications Commission is investing 342 million in 13 companies to provide high-speed internet to 175,692 locations. So when we think about trying to solve this entirety of the digital divide, it's going to require substantial amounts of federal resources. But the fortunate thing is we do have the federal resources based on RDOF, based off Treasury money, ARPA, which our office is administrating, and based off what we think we're going to receive from the infrastructure bill to completely solve the issues around the unserved population, then the underserved population, and then community anchor institutions. And then the last thing on affordability, which is critical. We often talk about when we do a ton of community engagement around the state, we often talk about the fact that all of this infrastructure money that our office is administrating, that our office will administer, really is going to be a busted investment if we can't address the affordability issue. And so last year, we really worked with all of you guys, including the Urban League, including the faith-based communities, everyone that we could talk to and engage with. We had conversations to push out the FCC Emergency Broadband Benefit Program, which provides $50 a month off your broadband bills, $75 if you live in tribal areas. And we had over 215,000 households in a very short period of time, in a 7-month period, receive benefit, which actually put us #1 in the country in terms of the number of people that have actually benefited from that program, which has really been cited by the White House and folks as a best practice. So homework assignment, not only for all of the folks on this call, but one of the things that we are actively trying to get an increased engagement is participation in the FCC's Affordable Connectivity Program, which is part of the EBB program, but it was signed in the infrastructure. And the only difference is in the ACP program, rather than $50, it's $30. And one of the eligibility criteria is increased from 150% below the poverty line to 200% below the poverty line. And so that's something that people can achieve immediate benefit. It's $30 off your broadband bills, which comes in the form of a benefit on a monthly bill. And that's something that we would love to partner with all the folks on this call to continue to push out. That's on the affordability. And just quickly on the literacy piece, in Louisiana, we have approximately 462,000 people between 18 and 64 years old, so working age folks that lack basic computer literacy skills. So we're not talking about Facebook and the creation of apps. We're talking about functional basic computer literacy skills, which prevents someone who's older, for instance, from accessing a telehealth visit. And so we have that data broken down on a per parish basis. And what we've seen is that, summarily, if you don't articulate the value proposition on the why internet's important and how it can benefit your lives, both professionally and personally, then adoption is going to be low. And so one of the things that, we'd love to work with all the folks on this call is how do we continue to drive the value proposition around the need for internet, both professionally and personally, so we can drive up adoption, but also then drive digital literacy around the same process. So, Telley, I'm going to stop there, but hopefully I gave the folks an overview of what we're doing.
I hope so too. But thank you for that informative information that we needed it. Kim, we're coming to you. How is the city of New Orleans thinking about the opportunity to use Infrastructure Act to bring digital equity to New Orleans residents?
Thanks, Telley. I want to start with going back just a little bit to what Veneeth talked about, which is what we know about the state of Louisiana and needing to bring this down to a city level for New Orleans. One of the biggest challenges to any of the broadband definitions, any of the funding sources is the definition of broadband and what we consider a served population. It's one of the biggest challenges we'll face. And it is about a rate of speed without becoming too technical. And I'm passionate about this because I am a telecommunications engineer by trade, right? So communicating and people having access to this type of connectivity and access to the internet is really important. And also I understand the magnitude, or I have an appreciation for what it takes to get them connected and to build these kinds of networks. But what is really important for New Orleans is to know that we look good to the FCC, meaning we've got connectivity across the city, right? And that does not really highlight the challenges that we have. For instance, in certain census areas, the percentage of people without internet access is almost 50%. The people in that census area with low performing internet, really, you don't get to see that because the area has coverage. That doesn't mean this coverage is sufficient in breaking this down to doing homework. Doesn't mean that a kid can deliver that instruction over that connection. So one of the things that the city has to do is amplify the need in New Orleans, right? We are comparing a need in a city where we have 100% coverage by definition to an area in Louisiana that has no coverage because it's rural, right? So where we look, or where the city gets positioned in that conversation, is kind of deceptive. So our first goal is to amplify the need here and be very specific about what New Orleans and what our residents need to have to become connected. And then actually just to fight for our own. That's something that's going to be really important to New Orleans, is to make those definitions really clear and separate an urban area and its challenges from the broader funding sources and the qualifications for those funding sources. So I think that is first and foremost our goal. And conferences like these are really important because we need to speak to the community and we need to give them that information so that they relate, this cost is, one, too expensive for me, so I don't have this thing, or I have this low cost program, the one that I can afford, and it doesn't serve my need. They need to know that that too is not okay. And that puts them, your constituents, it puts your members of your organizations, your clients, it puts them at a disadvantage. So we need to make sure people understand that there is a disadvantage and they have a need.
Thank you for that question, Kim. I will tell you selfishly, during COVID, I was hoping that the Wi-Fi would always go off at the house so that the kids could go back to the school. Right. I probably shouldn't say that publicly. Tess, we have you up next. What is the Education Superhighway, Tess, and what work is doing to help address the issues of the digital divide?
Yeah, thank you so much, Telley. And thank you to Veneeth and Kim for speaking so eloquently about the Affordable Connectivity Program and this unprecedented congressional funding that we're really seeing and hoping to be utilized on the ground. That like kind of perfectly lends to what ESH, Education Superhighway, is focusing on. So we actually have been around for about 10 years now, but recently pivoted our mission. So maybe some people knew our previous mission, where we primarily focused on connecting school districts to internet, utilizing the E-rate federal funding. And in a very dark time, which was March 2020, we reached our goal and we're preparing to shut down. And then we reached our goal of having 99% of public school districts connected to internet, scalable internet, primarily fiber and scalable cable, using the federal E-rate program. And we're preparing to shut down, and then everything changed, as we all know, and schools were pushed into hybrid environments, schools were pushed into remote environments, and we shifted our mission to focus on closing the digital divide, specifically for students and families affected by the affordability gap. So what Veneeth spoke to, which is one of many of the components of the digital divide nationally. Specifically, the affordability gap actually represents 2/3 of America's digital divide. So we identified that as a really tangible piece of the puzzle that we can focus our efforts on. So over the past 2 years, we've really been looking to rebuild our mission, and now are focusing on catalyzing the federal funding, this unprecedented federal funding that we've seen, and lowering the adoption barriers in those cases. So this comes in many different projects, but one of the projects that I'm focusing on specifically is partnering with cities. I've had many conversations with Kim, thank you, partnering with cities and state governments to essentially get mass ACP awareness campaigns out there. So we can talk more about this later in the panel, but despite this available funding, we're still actually seeing many barriers to access the funding, which fall in what we've analyzed as 3 buckets, which are awareness, trust, and enrollment. So within those 3 buckets, we've identified a few projects to hopefully counteract some of those awareness, trust, and enrollment barriers. And some of the ways that we're doing that now is by implementing apartment Wi-Fi programs that are easy for people to easily jump onto, working with cities to do CBO engagement campaigns where we're using them as a key catalyst to get the information out to the right people. I think Veneeth and Kim both talked about how are we reaching the right people at the right time. And we're really taking a step back and analyzing the specifics within the affordability gap to know who has access but just can't afford it and why. And analyzing, as Veneeth mentioned, analyzing that why, what is going to really kind of take this to the next level for people to feel comfortable signing up. Again, that trust factor. So currently implementing these apartment Wi-Fi programs, digital navigator programs, calling campaigns, enrollment campaigns. And I am specifically focusing on the K through 12 outreach because we really see school districts as a key catalyst to reach families and also can help overcome the enrollment barrier. In order to apply to ACP, you need some proof of eligibility because either under the federal poverty guidelines or luckily, they are now letting students and families use free and reduced lunch programs and CEP programs. So that's why we really see school districts being able to get families to the next step in the enrollment process. So we're focusing on working with school districts through our state and city channels to hopefully help some of those eligibility challenges that families have. And they have those documents for them already if they're an FRL or CEP school. So really working with larger school districts in urban areas to help families get connected using ACP.
Got it. Thank you, Tess. Well, we have reached the opening questions that we needed to get through. If you have a question that you want to ask, please put it in the chat. I'm monitoring the chat and I dropped something before, so we'll ask another question just until other folks may have some things. So I'm encourage you to please go into the chat and list something. So how about we'll start with a question we'll put forward for Kim. Kim, what does sustainable connectivity for all look like in Louisiana and in New Orleans? What does that really look like? I mean, it sounds like you're talking about mind-shattering engineering. What does that mean for everyday people?
It means sufficient. It means being able to be connected all the time. For people in New Orleans and in Louisiana in general, it means when a hurricane comes, you have access to information, right? And you have a way to get that information, to connect your device connected. So in New Orleans, it might mean something like we did during Hurricane Ida, which is we set up cooling stations. It was a place where you could go and get connected, right? So you could check email, apply for your federal benefits. So when we think about sustainability, it is access to the internet from multiple avenues, multiple venues. If we kind of categorize that or put sustainability or connectivity into one basket, which is when I'm home, I can get on the internet, or when I have a phone, I can get on the internet. If the phone breaks, if the home computer goes down, if the service is out, then we don't have sustainability. So from our perspective, it means being able to do things that allow residents to have access to that information and get connected in multiple ways. One of the things that the city is doing, even as it relates to the infrastructure bills, is building sustainability into the places where we can. So at our North centers, those 10 centers were pretty successful during Hurricane Ida, and we've got a plan to install generators there, maybe some solar powered technology, so that when people come into those centers during a disaster or something else, they have that access. It could mean that we build some infrastructure that allows us to compete with carriers or put up some competing networks so that they make theirs better. It might mean just pushing the needle a bit so that our residents understand how they could get connected or can afford the connectivity. And lastly, that other piece, Veneeth talked about those 4 barriers. The last one is having a device. Sometimes it means helping people out, either giving them a device or helping them repair devices. So we're looking at also device repair clinics. We partner a community engagement activity with technicians who are willing to help residents get their devices back into commission or back into service so they can be connected to the internet, and partnering with an organization that's going to be recycling old computers from private sector and now from the city of New Orleans, and refurbishing those devices and giving them out to the community. So we think that those things, addressing all of those elements, will lead us to some sustainability in connectivity.
Okay, Veneeth, I'm coming to you for a question. Again, if you have a question you want to put in the chat, please do so. But Veneeth probably doesn't have connectivity issues, Kim LaGrue. I mean, his internet runs.
You'd be surprised.
We know his internet, it runs like Bill Gates' internet, right? So, but for everyday other people on streets like Franklin and places like Cooper Row and Shreveport, if I don't have an issue, but I'm supportive because Kim and Tess just told me that this is an issue for other people who may be working class people that has less money and resources, how can I support those people? I'm not trying to separate them from Veneeth, but what can I do to be more supportive of this effort in order to help them?
Yeah, so what Kim said was really important. I mean, the question fundamentally on sustainability really pivots on really 2 words: reliability and resilience. We've heard the stories about kids going to school, right? Every public elementary, middle, high school, all the libraries that are public have really good internet going to it, if not fiber optic. And then the challenge statement then is, once they leave the confines of that library, or if they leave the confines of the school, then that's where it becomes a challenge. One of the things that we have advocated, and I think we've seen a quarter of the state's parishes do this, is when we've gone out, we have told these parish leaders and municipal leaders that it is critical that they develop their own game plan and their own broadband teams to specifically address the challenges that exist in their community. Because as I mentioned earlier, the challenges in East Carolina and Cameron and Washington, Bossier, and in St. Helena are going to be fundamentally different. And so we've had a quarter of the state's parishes put together broadband teams. We've put together a playbook. In those teams, in the construction of those teams, you typically have folks that represent school board. You've got some representing the LSU Ag Extension or Southern Ag Extension. You have Farm Bureau. You have local chambers of commerce, and you've got hospital executives, and you have all sorts of different folks, because healthcare has different use cases for different reasons. And so for folks like us that are less than fortunate to have internet, the way we can, at least from our office, advocate for helping recognize the problem, but also advocate for solutions, is for parish leaders to put together specific efforts locally where they can help bubble up to us at the state level the challenges that they have. And so we don't have necessarily all the answers, right? What's interesting about the infrastructure bill, and what's interesting about broadband, is we equivocate ourselves as a public startup. I mean, effectively, right? Our office didn't exist 18 months ago, and it's a year old. But on the flip side, even at the federal level, you have federal agencies like NTIA, US Commerce, obviously US Commerce, but FCC, all folks that have to also quickly accelerate their hiring to effectively execute all this federal money. So they're going through the same process that we're going to, which is real-time feedback from people on the ground, bubbling up to the state level, and then real-time feedback that we provide from the state level to the federal level. And I think what's really important when we do community engagement meetings, especially the way we do it, is it's critical for us to understand where the blind spots are, because the more we understand where those blind spots are from our office and understand specifically what the issues are, then the more effective we can then, from a policy perspective, prescribe solutions that we think are flexible enough, but are very tactical to addressing the challenges that people have. So we continuously over communicate with folks on the ground. They continuously over communicate when we on the ground, stakeholders to us, and that helps us inform where we need to direct federal funds as appropriate around the issues around affordability, access, literacy, and devices.
Got it. Tess, we're coming to you again. We're asking for questions. I keep asking that. We're asking for questions. If you have a question, please let us know. You may never get these three people on the phone at the same time again in a Zoom. Kim will hang up on you. So you better get the answers to the questions right now. Kim has hung up just on me before. Forgive me. That's not true. Tess, question for you. All of this sounds really amazing. But how is it realistically going to get done? What are the challenges? Mr. Fisher, I see you. I'm coming to you. What are the challenges that we have to making this work for each and every person? One, before you answer that, Mr. Fisher, please type your question into the chat and I will get it answered for you. Ms. Tess, go ahead.
Yeah, Telley, that's a really good question. I'm going to break this down into two separate pieces. One that we have is kind of a lot of the work that we've been doing over the past 10 years and continue to be challenged by, kept on our toes, is kind of creating these public-private partnerships with ISPs, internet service providers, right? So all of this connectivity is dependent on the adaptability and the flexibility of monopolized service providers throughout the country that it's a for-profit business, right? So, and we typically don't always see for-profit businesses working hand in hand with public goals. With that said, just to kind of throw a silver lining on that, because we have this federal funding right now, we actually are seeing service providers act a little bit more proactively to help low-income families, to help more rural areas. So I think a big challenge in that is just like kind of continuing that momentum, continuing to drive incentives with service providers and ensuring they're making accessible pathways to connectivity, specifically within ACP, and then also ensuring families and cities are aware of the service providers that are offering ACP on the ground, right? So I know in New Orleans, it's primarily Cox, and Cox does have an ACP program, but what does that look like if you're applying directly to Cox? How can we hold Cox accountable to make it as easy as possible for families to sign up? So that's a continued challenge that we're looking to, that we continuously kind of work at, and we have a service provider team that primarily engages with them. So that's one. And I would kind of look at some of the other ways, just general suggestion to this group, that we can kind of create cohesive relationships between public and private right now, because I think a lot of our public goals do depend on private incentives. So that is always kind of a daunting challenge. Let's just shift a little gear to what Veneeth was talking about, which are the ACP and federal funding challenges. In an ideal world, federal funding would be extremely accessible, extremely easy, 20 minutes to sign up, but it's federal funding. We don't always see that, right? The goal is to make it as easy as possible, and a lot of the work that we do actually is submitting comments to NTIA, our lobbying arm that's trying to make it as easy as possible, hopefully diminishing some of the enrollment challenges. But where we're really seeing the biggest challenges is, again, in those three buckets: awareness, even letting people know of this. I mean, now I'm working on more of a city and state level, but when I do still keep in touch with some of my larger district partners, and many districts aren't even aware of the ACP. So how are we making sure that we're getting all of our information in the hands of the right people and ensuring there's equitable access to that, despite the kind of pathways that we've typically seen to find out information, which is using an internet server. So how are we making sure the people that don't have internet are able to do that? And some of the ways that hopefully we can continue to conquer that is through CBO engagement, right? Community building organizations on the ground, doing calling campaigns, grassroots efforts to really make sure that everybody is aware of this federal funding, and hopefully it can be utilized effectively. Another area, a challenge that we're seeing is this trust. And I would say that's the biggest piece. Many of the families most in need of support are often the ones who are not reached by these broad awareness campaigns, as I mentioned. And there are address concerns, question concerns, submitting social security numbers based on immigration status, citizenship concerns, right? So ideally, we want to utilize institutions that have access to this information and can really safely advocate on behalf of families so they're not put in any precarious situations. Again, as I mentioned, this utilizing FRL, free and reduced lunches. I know there are high free and reduced lunch numbers across charter schools in New Orleans. So charter organizations can then apply on behalf of their families, which we're really excited that USAC is allowing them to do that. And then the third big piece that we're seeing is start to finish enrollment, right? Like applying to a program can always have its hiccups. So how are we making sure somebody is getting from A to B to C to really finishing that enrollment? And the way that hopefully we can all continue to help with this is having these stand-up grassroots efforts where we're sitting down with families and actually helping them apply and helping them go through the process. And we're continuing to lobby to USAC and the FCC as well to have FAQs, easier access to online portals, making, I think there's 3 ways to apply to the program now. And one of them's online, by mail, and directly to the ISP. So can we introduce more? Can we do it over the phone, right? So I hate to be the cynic in the room, but these are kind of these bigger, larger themes that we're seeing. And the goal really is to get as many boots on the ground to really make change, because where we see most change is at the local level. We see it when people are going directly to families and helping families and kind of persuading families to go through this process. And as Veneeth said, which really resonates with a lot of the work we do, anchoring in the why, anchoring in the importance of doing this and going through this process.
Got it. Should I ask for any more questions? Hold on, Bill Aaron, you're the man. Hold on. We got a question coming from Bill Aaron. Are there any successful examples of digital divide closure from around the country that can be remodeled in the Louisiana geography? So I'll ask that question again, and I don't know who it's for, but all 3 of you are really smart, so you'll figure it out. Are there any successful examples of digital divide closure from around the country that can be remodeled or used in the Louisiana geography? So who would like to take the first shot?
So let me maybe take a stab at that, Telley, because I think that question is especially important as you talk about the evolution of our office and the speed at which we're moving. When the governor asked me to take this position, one of the things I said was, look, let's not reinvent the wheel. Let's focus on what other states are doing, especially on the access piece and affordability, and really spend time understanding the successes, but also the challenges and what they would have done differently. And so we started spending a lot more time with folks from both North Carolina and Virginia. Both of those states have had broadband grant programs long before any of this federal money that's appeared. In fact, a lot of them, both of those states specifically, have had state broadband grant programs that have existed for years, including leveraging grant money from general fund dollars from the state level to help really push for this priority. So in essence, the way we look at Louisiana, it's really the byproduct of North Carolina and Virginia coming together, both on the access. There are other places in the country that does a phenomenal job in pushing out affordability program and from a best practice. And Tess, I'm sure you can speak to, on the affordability side, what other states and communities are doing really effectively and really well. There are folks, for instance, what was really interesting in the state of Idaho, they are doing some really creative things to addressing the telehealth gap in a number of counties in Idaho, where you have partnerships between Blue Cross Blue Shield Foundation and libraries, where they help to provide and equip and convert a room in a library to serve as a telehealth hub. So when we look at and scour the state, we're often having conversations with other state broadband leaders, both nationally, but also locally, to understand how they're addressing access, affordability, literacy, and the device issue, and things that we think we can replicate based on models that have existed elsewhere. We are shameless in R&D, of course, our research and development, but also ripping and duplicating those efforts in Louisiana. And so hope I answered your question, Bill, but I would imagine, Tess, you have some specific best practices you could probably share on some of the other things that were addressed.
Go ahead, Tess.
Yeah, I'll jump in here. Thanks so much. And I love the shameless plug and play. That's what I love so much about this sector is let's do that and let's continue to do that. I mean, I personally do that all the time. So yeah, so to be completely transparent, some of our models are in pilot mode now. So I just want to caveat with that. With that said, we do have a few city pilots that we're seeing as successful. We're partnered with Oakland Unified School District in California, and we're seeing, we're looking to replicate that model. And I know, Kim, we've spoken about that. We're looking to replicate that model around the country with our city partnerships. So what we see from that is kind of creating a broader ecosystem to tackle the following: the actual Wi-Fi, so standing up apartment Wi-Fi systems in public housing and partnering with public housing in that specific city. So that kind of conquers that infrastructure piece. The second is the awareness piece, partnering with community building organizations, specifically those that have access to those eligibility documents, as I mentioned. So food assistance programs, SNAP programs, local churches who provide food assistance, things like that. So really using them as a catalyst for outreach. And then the third, as I mentioned, is the actual school district to reach families. So those three pieces are how we're developing our pilot model right now and beta testing it. Not to say that they're guinea pig, they're a wonderful partner, but beta testing it in Oakland right now. And also we'll be doing that in Charlotte, North Carolina in the coming months. So that's kind of the program that we're looking to put in place around the country, and really testing what's going to work with those three pieces and where we might need to fill in the gaps. Just a general piece of information that we've learned to be successful around the country is kind of this first piece. In order to do any of those is having an awareness of who is most at need in your city. As Kim mentioned, taking a step back and evaluating and almost mapping out where to start, because these are because a lot of these solutions do tend to be at the local level. You don't want to start way too big. Of course, you want to have these broad awareness campaigns to put the information in the right hands, but where we see a little bit more success is almost mapping out corridors, so areas of access where you can reach a set amount of people who might be at most need or have fit in one of the buckets that Veneeth spoke about. So a higher affordability gap, a higher infrastructure gap. If you're going to start there, we mostly work with the highest affordability gap with the highest number of service providers in that region. So that means that there is that infrastructure available, yet there is a reason that these families are not using it. So that's how we've done some of our mapping. So that pilot program does capture like a lot more in terms of the pillars of success, but just a key piece, no matter what you're doing, is kind of building those data, building that data internally first, so that there can be a plan of attack per se.
Thank you for that. Mr. Antonio Carrier, I hope you fixed your contact in your eye. We were very concerned that you were poking yourself in the eye just now. Your screen is on, brother. Next question from Suno Observer. The question is there a plan to use refurbished devices? Oh no, a plan to use refurbished devices was mentioned. Is there a plan to ensure that the devices that are used are going to be the most up-to-date and industry standard in the age of touchscreen and VR?
I'll take that one.
Kim?
We talked a little bit about that plan, and I'll tell you, the plan or that program is designed to just get something into the hands of the community and for people without devices. So those devices may not be the most up to date, but the partners that we're working with, and most partners that recycle and refurbish devices, have a set of minimums. And they say, we won't accept any device below this minimum specification. And that means that the device can be connected to the internet and basically loads of the latest operating system, because some of those requirements keep people safe, right? So we can't have devices that are so out of date that they allow viruses or harm or content that can't be monitored closely for kids, for instance, to be used on those devices. So we go by those company minimums. And the company that we're working with specifically is based out of Houston. It's called CompuDoc, the city's refurbished vendor. They offer, and many others that we've seen around the country, Baltimore and in the Carolinas, they offer a year of tech support with the refurbished device. And that is really helpful. It ensures that, one, I don't think they want to give you a device that you couldn't use for a year, right? But it also allows them to learn how to use that device at some minimum operating level. And because this is for many of the people who don't have any device, they may not be as advanced as someone who needs a touchscreen or VR. So they may not be that powerful, but they do meet the minimum standards. And we rely on those vendors to keep up with the industry.
Got it. Anybody else needs to chime in? Mr. Stephen Fisher, I don't know if you're still on, your hand is raised. I was asking for your question. No problem, Suno Observer. Okay, Mr. Fisher. Oh, Lord, this is a nice question. Hold on. 1/3 of Louisianians' population is Black, but LSU and Tulane train comparatively few Black medical students and Black dental students. Some of the HBUs have dental and medical schools, blah, blah, blah. So why didn't Louisiana leadership permit dental and medical? This is a healthcare question. Instead of building healthcare infrastructure, instead of building the means for generating the future of health equity, health resources are removed from mostly African-American. Mr. Fisher, is that a question for this group? Mr. Fisher, I think we may have, I'm reading the question, I read it clearly, but I don't think that that's a question for this group. Maybe we're in a different group. I think you were in a different group, but no problem with that. But we did get your question in. Anybody else? Is there any other question? Or if we don't have anything else right now and no one else in the group, I'm going to put people on the spot. Dr. Keisha Smith, I see you in the group. Tandra LeMay, why haven't y'all asked any questions? I keep asking you over and over again. But Veneeth, tell us something that we don't know. Give us an inside plug of something that regularly every day. My sister lives in the 7th Ward off of Galvin Street. She complains about her internet sometimes. She doesn't have as many resources as I do. And when she fusses at me about the internet, I call people like Kimberly, who are 3 times smarter than me, to try to get it fixed. If you're in the house, you know, we know the kids are back in school. They're probably going to be back in school in August. We still want the internet to work. What is the help, or what steps, Tess, does everyday people, what should they be doing, and what steps should they take in order to try to improve what's happening at home so that they can, you know, everyone has this phone and they need it on Wi-Fi, and the iPad needs to be on Wi-Fi, and the cable and the internet, all those different things. What do we need to do, Veneeth?
So I think and I mentioned this earlier, the more information we hear on the ground as to the challenges around access, affordability, the literacy, the better. So on the access, if you struggle with it, or if you're paying for something and it's not good enough, what I would strongly suggest people to do is go to our website, connect.la.gov, which I posted in the sort of the middle of the chat box, and please take a speed test. What the speed test does is it provides a snapshot as to the quality of your internet at that time. The more data points that we get from these speed tests to help us understand who has what at what speeds and what they're paying for, the more we can then direct federal resources to addressing those challenges. And so when you take the speed test, the advice is you can take that speed test as many times during the day as possible. Do not take the speed test at 3 a.m., but take it during normal operating hours, right? Take it in the morning, take it just afternoon, and take it during the evening time when there's peak usage. What you may see is that there are companies that may say, well, you do have access to high-speed internet. And your question is, sure, I may have it, but it's going to be at 3 a.m., right? And so the thing is, the most immediate thing that folks in the community can do is, of course, if they're eligible for the Affordable Connectivity Program, sign up. Second is to address the access issue, take the speed test. The last thing, Telley, and one of the things that we have to do, and we're doing it actively now, is we have to put together a 5-year plan that helps to identify to the U.S. Department of Commerce, which is going to administer all this broadband money, what the uses of that money is going to be for. We have spent the last couple of weeks doing stakeholder engagement in partnership with the Pew Charitable Trust. And so we're going to continue to do that. And we would love to engage the folks on this call and love to engage folks at the Urban League to help us really understand from the populations that you serve, African Americans and others, what the specific challenges are for the communities. Because again, the more we understand, it's how we push things, both strategy and tactically, the better it's going to be. But I think what's also important is how we message, which is why we're spending significant more time over the last couple of months partnering with the faith-based community, because they have actually, to be honest, in Louisiana, they play a critical role, not in Louisiana, in the South, as a singular trusted anchor in many of these communities that are largely unserved. So part of what we're trying to do is understand how we can work with the faith-based community, how we message, when we message, and the hows. And the more we understand that, in essence, we create let's work together to maybe create a faith-based playbook that helps to inform all the pastors throughout the state of Louisiana. And that's something that we can work on. That's something we don't have, but that's something we'd love to work with all of you on.
Question to you, Tess. I have an iPhone 11, and this is a question that everybody should know. I know that Kim and those people at the city of New Orleans has slowed my phone down. That's what everyday people be saying. I have to get an iPhone 13 because Kim and Veneeth went to drinks and they said that if we don't get this updated phone, we don't have 5G. And I literally made that up. I know that isn't true about Kim and Veneeth. But to everyday people and the people who just use the phone for email, is it true? Do you need 5G phones? What is all of that about? What is it about in New Orleans? Is it a real thing? I couldn't use my phone when I was at the Muses Parade trying to text my wife on the float. What is that all about, Tess?
Okay, firstly, that's really awesome that your wife was on a float in Muses Parade. As a Tulane graduate, I am having a lot of jealousy around that. I never got the chance to walk in a parade. And Muses is my favorite one. Good question. Maybe the 5G gods aren't going to want me to say that, but that is actually not where I encourage people to prioritize most of their efforts right now. So actually in broadband definitions, 5G, while it can be helpful for like on the go hotspots or things like that, we don't actually see that as sustainable internet. So because fiber and cable, which are at-home internet, fiber specifically, if there is fiber available, are the most desirable methods. We're continuing to push for using phones where you want to use phones, but really making sure there's that internet in the home that you can rely on. So I also felt really pressured to get the iPhone 13 when my LTE stopped where I live in New York, and my LTE was suddenly not working very well. And I'm like, wait, there's something going on. But really, we're encouraging partners to shift emphasis away from these hotspots and these 5G devices. Of course, it's important in everyday like cultural life. I'm not undermining the way that fits into society, but from a broadband gap, these aren't scalable methods of internet. And we typically see there being a lot of loopholes when relying on these types of devices, just like cell tower shortages or things like that, or I just using hotspots and that hiking up prices for your phone bill. So at the beginning of the pandemic, as I mentioned, I primarily work with the K-12 space. We saw a lot of K-12 leaders, rightfully so, understandably so, push out hotspot usage because they had to work in a second responding to an international virus. So I'm not undermining that whatsoever, but the goal really is now to take a step back, strategically plan around how you can actually get sustainable internet on the home and not rely on this thing that we're all addicted to, because typically we don't see that having as high a level of reliability. And then I did just want to speak to something that Veneeth said that really resonated with some of the work that we're doing that hopefully people can walk away with, is that on the ground knowledge. I know I just shifted gears, but is that on the ground knowledge is so key to all of this broadband work. It really is. I mean, even learning about hotspots and phones was all through our wonderful K through 12 district partners that gave us the opportunity to have those feedback loops. And even I'm thinking back to my meeting with Kim originally, learning so much about what CBOs in New Orleans actually exist. Even on this call, learning that there's so much emphasis on the faith-based messaging. That's incredible, right? So I really do encourage this group to talk as much about this as you can in your circles. And then hopefully that information can get higher and higher and higher or wider. And we can begin to be kind of focusing on the narratives that need it most. And where I really see a lot of power, as Veneeth mentioned, is in the hands of community building organizations such as churches and different faith-based sanctuaries where they can build that trust. So just wanted to really re-emphasize that point.
Kim, I will turn it over to you. And as we come to closing remarks, I chair the trustee board at a church for a guy named Pastor Brandon Boutan that United Fellowship. And let me say, when that internet wasn't working well, or when things were going out, if you ever wanted to really be blessed by an older Black lady who would come to church, my grandbaby set me up to watch the computer to see church, and it was going in and out. You should do something about that. And you'd be like, yes, ma'am, I'm gonna figure it out. And so we realized that has become a huge way in which people are able to view fellowship and to have church across a different level of church and disciplines. Kim, we're closing. We got about 2-3 minutes. Is there anything else that people would need to know for purposes of this call and the way in which the city of New Orleans is helping us with some of these issues?
I have something to say about that very
Go ahead.
particularly. I need people to think about the internet like a utility, like water and electricity, right? The difference between that is water is water, right? Everybody gets it. The bill goes up and goes down. And the water company knows they have to invest everywhere. There can't be a place where water doesn't flow. Entergy, a little different, right? But we're moving the needle just a little bit. Entergy has to bring power to every area. But when they don't make investments in areas, your lights go out faster than another area, right? So when a storm comes, this area might blow down a transformer or a power line. You're more subject to trees. They may not maintain that area as well. So you suffer some outages and you get to complain. Internet is a new utility, but it is as essential. And what we don't have is the same type of regulation. Telley, you know, we want to talk to our carriers, right? We want to appeal to them. We want to help them make investments or guide them to make investments. And as Veneeth said, people need to complain. You need to, in whatever way you can, understand that internet is becoming a God-given right to you, just like water and electricity. The difference is those providers aren't right now driven or forced to make investments in areas. So it's the one place where you have a utility, and because there's no profit in that area, there might not be enough investment, right? So we really need you to understand how this is working and do what Veneeth is asking and represent yourself, right? And understand that those things are owed to you because you're paying for this service. And once you understand the value of it, you start paying for it, then you start having a voice and saying, church cannot go out. It is not fair for my church service to go out when someone else's doesn't. And my grandmother needs to fellowship because during the pandemic, she can't get out the house, just like my kid can't go to school and have online learning. Those things are really important. So we've got to put ourselves in a position where we're forcing our carriers and our investors to invest in areas where there might not be as much profit. It's almost like if you build it, they will come scenario. We've got to get them to make those investments so that people get the services that they need in those areas. So That's what one of the things that's really important for us to do. And one of the things that the city is going to do for that is build some municipal fiber, not for the reason of competing, but municipal fiber drives down competition, right? We have some services here and we want to use it for our own good. We have police, fire, emergency medical services. We want to deliver data to institutions, our academic institutions. We want to do all of those things. So we want to build municipal fiber, not to compete with our carriers, but to help them out and to help our community. So those are the things that the city would do. And I'd love for people to take some of those things away, especially what Veneeth is asking us, and especially, and most importantly, Tess and the Education Superhighway, and making sure that families can get connected to the internet, even if it's through the schools. Our kids are our digital ambassadors, and we really need them to understand the importance of the internet and bring that back into their communities. So we need to make a way for them.
Tess, you didn't even know that Kim was helping you pile on me because she knows I'm one of the lobbyists for one of the providers there, but I'm gonna remember that next time I see you, Kim. But you're right, we do need it. And as a New Orleanian, it is important that we have it. Tess, give us a few closing remarks, and then Veneeth will come to you quickly, and then Kim will have you close because we are 1 minute. You got 1 minute, Tess.
Okay, I'll be quick. Kim spoke so eloquently, it's going to be hard to follow that. But yeah, just to kind of circle back on everything I said, and to recap, this next year is really about, and I mean this with a confident head on my shoulders, but it's about trial and error. It's about seeing what sticks. It's about seeing what works on the ground. I stand by Kim's statement. Internet is a utility, 100%. If every single person could easily be connected with a snap of my finger, I really, really believe that they deserve that right. And right now we do have some of this unprecedented work happening at the congressional level. So as much as this group can, as much as anyone you know can, to get that information out, seek help where you need help. If somebody's asking questions, there's a lot of online resources. Reach out to Education Superhighway. We're always looking to help. Yeah, just continue to keep this conversation going, continue to try connecting with different people that could help families on the ground. And I will leave it at that. Thank you.
Veneeth, you have 45.5 seconds.
I'm going to give you back a little bit more time so you could knock it out. Look, the vision we have for the state is to eliminate the digital divide by 2029. So we have to eliminate both access, affordability, and literacy. We have spent the last year significantly building the building blocks to be able to do that. This year is going to be another pivotal year as we get all this infrastructure money. Stay tuned as we start to engage with all of you to help us inform our 5-year plan. That'll help us even move faster to eliminating the digital divide once and for all. So look forward to hearing from all of you, and thanks for inviting me to the panel.
Kim, please close us out.
I'm just going to echo the sentiments of my panelists. Please connect with the state of Louisiana. Send information to Veneeth. Help us represent New Orleans. Help us get our kids connected. And the Urban League is a great partner in this effort. So we need all the partnerships that we can to represent New Orleans and get us into a space where we have great connectivity. Bridging the digital divide is very real here, and we're really looking forward to doing that.
I will say thank you, Kim, Tess, and Veneeth. This is very informative, amazing information. And as a board member, please continue to support the Urban League. Thank you for being part of the Broadband and Digital Equity panel. God bless you. I hope you have a great, beautiful day.
Thank you so much, everyone.